I know what you're thinking. Why does the history of barbering matter? What does that have to do with giving a client a smooth fade today? Well, the history of barbering matters because you're about to join a trade that has been central to society for thousands of years. You're about to become part of that history, so it's good to know where you come from. For instance, did you know barbers used to bloodlet people? That's right. They were on the level of doctors back in the Middle Ages. And did you know some of the earliest African American entrepreneurs that helped pave the way for civil rights were barbers? Knowing this history helps us better understand the role of barbers in society and how much barbering has transformed into the art form that it is today. There's so much barbering history, we've broken it down into two parts. So let's begin with a rundown of what we're going to cover in part one about the ancient origins of barbering. By the end of this lesson, you'll know about the evolution of barbering, the earliest barbering tools, the origin of the word barber, the connection between religion, customs, traditions, and barbering, as well as the historical influences of beards in barbering. Let's start with the beginning of barbering. In this segment, you'll learn about the evolution of barbering, early barbering tools, and the origin of the word barber. Barbering is an old profession, one of the oldest in the world. Artifacts in ancient burial sites have revealed that nearly every culture had grooming practices and rituals. Some of those practices required the help of a professional. The million-dollar question is, when did barbering services start? As far as researchers can tell, haircutting and styling was practiced during the last ice age 15,000 years ago. But those OG barbers didn't have shears. They used flint, bone, and oyster shells to cut and style hair. Braiding was also common thousands of years ago in many cultures. Way back then, people believed that there were strong connections between the mind, body, and spirit. This led to a number of hair-related superstitions. For example, some cultures believed spirits entered the body through the hair, and the only way to get rid of bad spirits was to cut a person's hair. These spiritual beliefs helped elevate barbers to an important social status. In some tribes, barbers were just as important as shamans and priests. The work of ancient barbers was also important because beards and hairstyles indicated a person's social status, political affiliation, occupation, or religion. Now, the Egyptians really brought barbering to a whole new level. Their barbers had bronze and copper razors, scissors, brushes, and combs. There are written records of barbers hooking up Egyptian noblemen with shaves and haircuts 6,000 years ago. Wealthy men and women had their heads shaved for comfort, and priests had their entire bodies shaved every 3 days. Barbers in ancient Egypt had some serious job security. In Africa, around the same time, barbers used intricately carved combs, colored bands, and decorated beads to create hairstyles. They also braided hair into unique patterns. The braid pattern would tell others what your status was within the tribe. Barbers are even mentioned in the Bible. Those Bible passages reveal that barbering was a regular part of life in the Middle East more than 3,400 years ago. Take thou a barber's razor and cause it to pass upon thy head and upon thy beard. That's Ezekiel 5:1. During Greece's golden age around 500 BC, barbering services became an important part of everyday life. A clean beard trim was a status symbol. This was also the time when barbershops became a place for men to gather and have discussions. Of course, that meant barbers were among the elite and were leading citizens in that day. The Romans took barbering up a notch. After barbering and shaving was introduced in Rome around 296 BC, wealthy men got shaves and haircuts daily. Clean shaven was the trend until Emperor Hadrian came on the scene in 117 AD. He kept a beard to hide battle scars on his chin. Pretty soon, all the other Roman guys were sporting beards again. And that's where the word barber comes from. It's from the Latin word barba, which means beard. Tonsorial is another Latin barbering term that means to cut hair with shears or a razor. If you hear someone call themselves a tonsorial artist, they're a barber. All right, it's time for a pop quiz question to see if you were paying attention. How long have barbers been providing haircutting and styling services? Is the answer A, 1,000 years, B, 15,000 years, or C, 50,000 years? If you answered B, you're right. Now let's talk about the connection between religion, customs, traditions, and barbering. In this segment, you'll learn about how religion, customs, and traditions have shaped the role of the barber in society. There have been some wild beliefs connected to barbering over the years. In many cultures, only priests and spiritual leaders could be barbers because hair clippings were thought to have the power to bewitch people. In Greece, some believed that cutting hair could decrease a person's intelligence. Native American tribes thought that possessing another person's hair allowed you to control that person. The only thing more influential to barbering than religion was social status. In ancient times, hairstyles and beards told the rest of the world how important you were. It was even used to show military rank and indicate when a boy reached adolescence. By the Middle Ages, religion and politics were heavily influencing the work of barbers. For hundreds of years, churches and clergymen had a huge influence on hairstyles and beards within the general public. So did political leaders and royalty. Basically, if you were the barber of a major public figure, your work could be trend-setting. A tonsure haircut is the perfect example of one of the most prominent trends clergymen use to set themselves apart. You've probably seen it before in history books. The tonsure haircut was also popular among Christian monks. Barbers shaved the top of the head clean, leaving a ring of hair around the edge. Monks rocked the tonsure haircut until the 1970s. Now let's take a closer look at beards and shaving. In this segment, you'll learn about the historical influence of beards in barbering. People have been shaving longer than they've been reading and writing. The earliest razors are believed to be up to 42,000 years old. Artifacts from over 10,000 years ago also showed men with clean-shaven faces. And it's well known that ancient Egyptians shaved their beards and faces daily. Mesopotamians, Sumerians, Greeks, they all had beard-free faces back in the day. Throughout history, beards have been associated with strength, manhood, and wisdom. But there were other factors beyond public perception that shaped beard trends. Whether or not men had beards was largely a matter of what was socially acceptable. In some cases, men shaved because they wanted to. Other times, they had to shave because priests and rulers demanded it. Peter the Great even put a tax on beards so men would shave. Beards have been symbolic over the course of history. The next time you give a client a shave, remember that their facial hair has personal and cultural significance. All right, let's wrap up part 1 of the history of barbering. We've covered a lot of ground today. We now know that barbering is one of the oldest professions in the world, and ancient barbers enjoyed a very high social status. We also know that the word barber comes from the Latin word barba, for beard. We also know the first razors are around 42,000 years old, and that the act of barbering is at least 15,000 years old. We also know religion and customs have had a huge influence over barbering services and trends, as well as beards having fallen in and out of fashion have always had symbolic meaning. When you made the choice to get a barbering license, you didn't just take the step towards a new career. You became a part of a legacy with an industry with a rich history that will change your life. It's your future. Now go and get it. All right, it's time for our History of Barbering Part 1 mini quiz. Question 1. Barber comes from what Latin word? A. Bara, B. Braca,